So on the 7th of November, Muslim gangs went out hunting for Jews in Amsterdam. And what kicked all this off, if you pardon the pun, it was a football match between Ajax and Maccabi Tel Aviv. It was a Europa League match, which Ajax won 5-0, by the way. But that's the last mention of football that we're really going to get. So it's also worth mentioning, in a sort of bitter twist of irony here, that Ajax fans have a reputation for being disproportionately Jewish. And so it's very similar to Tottenham Hotspur, in London, right? They're a Premier League side, if you don't know. This is all football, or if you're in the global minority, soccer. So it was based around a football match, but a lot of this stuff, to my mind, doesn't seem related to the football. That was the reason that these Jewish people were there in Amsterdam. They were there to watch their home team. And as we can see here, for example...
And Tel Aviv, I imagine most of their fans...
That's what I mean.
All right, but Ajax fans as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
As well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, right.
But here you can see just great big crowds of people chasing people down and just beating them up. And we're going to see a lot of that. There is going to be lots of videos of these sorts of things going on. So if you are sensitive to this sort of thing, I wouldn't suggest watching. But I think it's very important to see the nature of these things going on, because these are your streets. This could happen to you, and I think it's important to know what the world is like, and you shouldn't mollycoddle.
What the world is like now, anyway. After we've
exactly, and that's going to be one of those
people.
That's going to be one of those themes that I'm going to be addressing, because I think that this is something that need not happen. That it's not the native Dutch doing this; it is Muslims doing this. And we'll see plenty of evidence of that. So there's if we could go to the first video, Samson. So this is a video of people hunting down a guy who's saying, "I'm not even Jewish," basically, and they're hitting him on the ground, hitting him there, and they're just beating random people up that they just suspect could be Jewish. He claimed not to be. I don't know whether he was or not, but he was saying it in English, which is interesting. There's an even more shocking video. This is probably one of the worst ones, where a Muslim seemingly recorded himself driving on the pavement deliberately, running people over. I don't know whether it's a particularly good idea. Can we just show the start of the video, Samson, and not actually show them hitting people if possible? Just to show that it does exist. But if we can pause it... Oh cheers. But yeah, this is the sort of thing that's going on.
If only the British police were there, because they could have gone up to these mobs and said, would you please leave your weapons in the mosque?
Are you going to leave your car in a mosque? But
car park, I guess. But
mm-hmm. And if we go back to the links here we are. So they were going around and stopping people and asking for IDs for basically to get random people to prove that they were or were not Jewish. You see this guy here, he's been stopped, and they're asking him to show his ID. And obviously he's a bit like, what's going on here? What you on about? And so these roving gangs of Muslims are in a country which they're not native to, imposing their views on the native population. Obviously it's not the native Dutch. There's no appetite for it. From the reaction of Dutch people, it's universally horror from what I've seen, and rightly so. I mean, to see this happening on your streets to people who haven't done anything is horrible. You can see he's actually gone and got his ID out in the end here. And then if we go to the final video, Samson, there's more evidence of this going on. There's I found this one online of them just fighting in the streets. And there's plenty more where this came from. There's the video of someone getting thrown into a canal. There were also, it was alleged that people were kidnapped as well. They also, if we can stop the video here, they also beat up women as well. And presumably they didn't check people's IDs to see if they were over the age of 18. So I imagine they probably targeted some people who were younger as well. Here's a woman who's been punched. I've just got a screenshot of that one because it's horrible. This is something that has been imported to the Netherlands and the rest of Europe as well, whereby these are Muslim people who have brought their religious conflict to Europe, where it doesn't belong. We wouldn't be doing this these days.
Well, our Western governments have brought them here anyway.
That's true, yes. And I saw a tweet here from Eva Vladingerbroek, who, if you can guess from the name, is Dutch. And she points out something which is something I've noticed as well. And she says, this isn't new or limited to anti-Semitism, though, especially the Moroccan youth, which are the people implicated in a lot of this, who have been harassing, hunting down and plaguing the native Dutch population for decades, but nobody ever cared. Those of us who dared to speak up were labelled racists and mid-century German enthusiasts, and were shunned. And mind you, these young migrants are often 4th or 5th generation already. You can barely call them migrants, but they're more hostile to the West than their parents and grandparents. The idea that integration comes with time is a lie that is directly refutable when looking at the situation in the Netherlands. And it's also directly refutable if you look at crime data from other European countries as well. You look at, say, some of the Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Denmark. You can look at some UK data. Other data around Europe. It shows that actually it's the second generation and third generation that are even more overrepresented in crime. The first generation are already overrepresented as is if they're from North Africa, the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa. All of those demographics are overrepresented. Places like Japan, massively underrepresented. And it tells you something about their culture, doesn't it? Because it's not just that they're an immigrant or that it's their rate of poverty. It's not socio-economic factors, because in Britain, for example, the people most likely to be in poverty, which is a questionable metric in and of itself because it's calculated based on the median, so it's always people in poverty, but that's by the by, it is Pakistanis and Bangladeshis who are not the most overrepresented in violent crime. And so this link between poverty or socio-economic factors is not true. It is a cultural phenomenon. And I think we can see that by the nature of the crimes here.
As a general rule, and I do mean very broad strokes of the brush here, historically, people don't integrate. Mm-hmm. It's not really a thing throughout most of human history. People don't really integrate. They're not really interested in it. They build enclaves of their own. And I'm not really interested in the project of integration anymore. I feel like even people that just call for better, closer, deeper integration, they're the same types that just want to hear about the context of the last crime. They're just prevaricating.
Well, if you look at the evidence, it's failed, hasn't it?
It's absolutely failed, and it's not going to work. Now, I don't want to try harder to integrate these people.
Well, it's like inviting someone into your home and then they insist on following rules that they would have in their own home. That makes you a bad house guest, and it makes you a bad guest in another country as well. If I go abroad, even just on holiday, I obey the rules of the country I'm in. It's just good manners to do that, right? And so to go to another country and then impose your culture on someone means that, and I, by the way, disavow this when it's drunk Brits abroad as well. If we're going to the Balearics and ruining the nice, quaint island life, I think that's a really bad thing too. Mm-hmm. It's not that I have a double standard. It's that I think that this is just a massive disrespect to the people who live there, to the Dutch people having to tolerate this, to the Jewish people who got beaten up, obviously, as well as lots of other cultures as well, whereby we're expected to tolerate things that in another time would not be tolerated, but we apparently have to. And
it's like inviting a tiger to tea.
Mm-hmm. And it's not only the cultural problems and the violence and the crime. In this article that Connor wrote that he put me on to, I can't remember exactly where it is, but I'm going to read this extract. Non-EU migrants and their descendants in the Netherlands were an annual cost of 27 billion euros between 2016 and 2019, and 400 billion net between 1995 and 2019. This group are, on average, never net tax contributors across their lifetimes. By contrast, Western European, East Asian and Anglosphere migrants made an annual net contribution of $1 billion. It tells you all you need to know, doesn't it?
Yep. That
is not only a cultural problem, a financial problem, and many other different kinds of problem, there's not even any reason. And it's also worth mentioning as well, this is a Dutch-born captain of Morocco's national football team, and he was out there basically encouraging people to go out and pursue these people. And this has resulted in 62 arrests, although I have seen people objecting, saying a lot of these arrests happened before and during the football match and not afterwards, where most of the violence happened. But I've not been able to take the time to look at each individual arrest, because obviously it's a massive task. And I only had this morning to prepare for this. But that's one of the things that's being discussed. And it's also worth mentioning, for the sake of... sorry, I've got this as well. It's been picked up by lots of international press. This is a Hungarian outlet. This is titled, Migrants threw a Jewish fan into the river, kidnapped another, and then threw him out of a moving car in Amsterdam. And this is what's being discussed across the world. And, you know, that previous article was the New York Times. And so it's across the Atlantic as well. And so... as I was about to say, this is one that I do want the audio for, Samson. So there was a minute's silence for the victims of the floods in Spain, which, you know, is perfectly reasonable, just happened. And...
doesn't sound very silenty to me.
Yeah, these are the Tel Aviv fans making lots of noise. And I don't think that these Muslims that went out were particularly upset about this. I don't think that's a valid excuse. But for the sake of balance, I would like to show that some people were not behaving themselves either.
That's a bit rum.
Yeah, it's very disrespectful from both sides here. And obviously, Islam and Spain, long and storied history, don't always get along. And there was also there were lots of Muslims pointing out that some of these Tel Aviv supporters were going out and taking down Palestinian flags, which I can see why it would wind up some Muslims. But again, it doesn't justify going out and harassing people with IDs, running them over with your car, beating them up. I think that collectively punishing people is not the way to go. We've sort of moved past that about 1,000 years ago.
There is something more to the narrative than the Tel Aviv fans did absolutely nothing and were put upon for doing absolutely nothing. There is more to it than that then.
Because obviously the Israel-Palestine conflict's been going on for some time now, and this is a sort of next level of escalation. And for that to happen, you kind of have to presume that something must have changed for this to have gone on in the first place. But it's also been suggested, here are some screenshots from a WhatsApp. Of course, you know, take everything with a pinch of salt because everything's still emerging. Of someone saying, hang Palestinian flags in the city, they'll come like rats to take them down. They're suggesting. That's what they said. And they're trying to claim that it was baited, basically, that they knew this would happen and it would be a justification, which I don't know. You know, do I believe this? It's possible. Who knows? But it's just what's being speculated at the minute for the sake of complete transparency. So there obviously was quite a response to this. The king of the Netherlands said, we failed Jews during the football attacks as we did under the mid-century Germans. Again, I'm saying this because of the censorship online, if I say that word.
Did the mid-century Germans import hundreds of thousands of Muslims then?
No.
Right.
I don't think they did. I feel like the Dutch king's being a little bit harsh on the Netherlands. I mean, they did what they could, right? I think that's fair to say. Bo, you're our resident historian.
Yeah, no, I mean, sure. Yeah.
And the Dutch Prime Minister denounced it as a pogrom against Israelis, and he had a call with Netanyahu. Wilders also used that same word. He says, we've become the Gaza of Europe, Muslims with the Palestinian flags hunting down Jews. I will not accept that, never. The authorities will be held accountable for their failure to protect the Israeli citizens, never again. And of course, Wilders being quite a strong Zionist, he's quite open in his support for Israel. And so he's obviously going to be very strong on this. We also had von der Leyen saying it's unacceptable, of course. Her and the EU have been central to importing lots of the Muslims that are causing this in the first place. So it's a little bit rich coming from her. And there was a pro-Palestine rally afterwards as well. which we'll be getting onto. And the mayor at first described it as boys on scooters. It was just boys on scooters, not just Muslims. But then he must have wised up very quickly, because he also did put a ban on pro-Palestine protests, and it actually resulted in the police detaining about 50 protesters at a pro-Palestine rally, which they weren't allowed to do, because they said you're not allowed to do it because of everything that's happened. And we can see...
It's all just
go
a
ahead.
foreign imported mess, though, isn't it?
I know, that's exactly my
Both
thoughts
sides
on it.
got no reason for this to play out in northwestern Europe.
I mean, random idea.
No reason at all.
Random idea, but what about Europe for the Europeans? I mean, that could work.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that had we not had mass immigration, this would not have happened. That's undoubtable. And of course, some of the Israelis did misbehave, but I would imagine that we wouldn't have seen the same level of street violence had the Muslims not been residing there in the first place. And apparently they were going around listening to whether people were speaking Arabic or Hebrew or whatever, and if they were speaking Hebrew, they were just going to beat them up. And here is, this is from the protest, where they're just trying to goad the police. You can see some left-wingers, look, the short hair is the dead giveaway there. But the police are coming in, and they're all there sort of goading them, trying to get a reaction out of them, which is something that quite often happens. Obviously, they've got the headdresses and things like that. Is it keffiyeh or something like that? I can't remember. The scarf thing that they have over their head. But the police come in and basically get a shot of them in the end. But I wanted to point out as well that Paris is going to see a football match between France and Israel, and they're having to deploy 4,000 police, probably armed police, to prevent the same thing happening there. So this is just causing massive problems for the European countries that in ordinary times would not have to deal with this sort of thing, and it is ridiculous as well. I think Israel actually flew out some planes or jets to rescue these Israeli citizens in Amsterdam as well. I don't know whether that was just one of those diplomatic things to sort of make it look like, oh, look at how badly they're treating us, we're having to come and rescue our citizens. I don't know whether it was actually something that tangibly helped. My suspicion is probably not. And then the actual country itself is advising fans to avoid France entirely, despite the 4,000 police officers as well, because they're saying it's not safe. And to be fair, it's not just Israelis that countries like France, countries like Britain are not safe for. They're not safe for the natives anymore. And it's precisely problems like this that are causing this sort of thing, aren't they? Things like this that we were never asked to host these people, and they're not good guests. And I don't think it should be our burden to bear.
Thanks for watching, folks. If you're enjoying the work we do and you'd like to support us, go to lotus.com, sign up for only £5 a month, and go and watch our Lads Hour about the elections. We're just salt mining and putting our enemies into crystals for this for an hour and a half. I'm not going to say it's our greatest intellectual work, but it is a lot of fun. And also go and follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at lotuseaters_com.